Ah, yes, Dead Rising. The game that not only wiped an entire town with bee-worshipping zombies, but also my Xbox after an hour of playtime. With its unique charm, this game stands out in a sea of other equally great zombie games, but for something much darker. Set in the hearts of a zombie-infested shopping mall, Dead Rising throws players into the shoes of Frank West, a tough, sarcastic freelance photojournalist who's always chasing the next big story. Known for his iconic line,
"I've covered wars, you know."
Frank jumps headfirst into the zombie outbreak of Willamette Mall, hoping to snap the story of a lifetime. But what he finds is way more than just a scoop. From the weird and downright pointless weapon choices, to some of the most hilarious but admittedly kick-ass cutscenes, it's honestly easy to forget that the town is being invaded by a flesh-eating virus. Even with all that said, for a game that has so much action in it, there's something scarier lurking behind the zombies. The real nightmare is the Psychopaths.
I was a walking punchline.
The Psychopaths aren't just any video game bosses. They're regular people driven to insanity by the outbreak, each spiraling into their own version of madness. Some break under pressure, while others revel in the chaos, seeing it as a chance to let loose their darkest desires. They're scattered throughout the mall, waiting to be found, each encounter offering a unique weapon, both physically and psychologically. Let's take a deeper look into each psychopath and what made them so
Perfect. Yeah.
Carlito Keyes isn't just your average villain with a grudge. He's the architect of one of the deadliest zombie outbreaks in video game history. The chaos he unleashes in the game isn't born from a love of destruction. It's fueled by a deeply personal vendetta.
Pachamama.
Carlito's journey begins in his hometown of Santa Cabeza, a peaceful community that becomes the testing ground for a disastrous US-backed bioweapon experiment. This experiment turns his life into a living nightmare, wiping out everyone he knew and loved, including his family and friends.
What in the world?
The horror that ravages Santa Cabeza leaves Carlito with one goal: revenge served with a side of zombies. Carlito doesn't just want revenge though. He wants to make the US pay for what was done to his people. And his plan? Well, unleashing a zombie apocalypse in the most unlikely place, a shopping mall in Willamette, Colorado. Frank West crosses paths with Carlito several times throughout the game, and let's just say, he doesn't go down easily. Carlito is a tactical mastermind. He's not just going to stand there and let you bash his head in with a baseball bat. Armed with everything from a sniper rifle to explosives, Carlito loves to use the mall's open spaces to his advantage. These boss fights with Carlito are a mix of tension and strategy. You'll be dodging bullets, avoiding traps, and trying to figure out how to close the gap between you and the sniper-happy maniac. He forces you to stay on your toes, and every time you think you've got him, he slips away. Carlito's ultimate downfall comes not through brute force, but through the unraveling of his own psyche. His quest for revenge blinds him to everything else, and while he dies a villain in the eyes of many, his tragic backstory and his love for Isabela keeps him from being a one-dimensional bad guy. Carlito isn't evil just for evil's sake. He's a man who's lost everything and wants the world to understand his pain, even if that means tearing it down in the process.
My purpose in life
has been to get revenge for what you people did to Santa Cabeza, to my hometown.
All right. Hey.
Isabela, like Carlito, hails from Santa Cabeza, a small town devastated by a horrific biological experiment gone wrong. This tragedy is central to understanding both characters. While Carlito is consumed by a desire for revenge against those responsible for the atrocities, Isabela is torn between loyalty to her brother and her growing sense of guilt over the consequences of their actions. Your first big clash with Isabela isn't just an ordinary fight. It's a wild, high-speed showdown. Riding her motorcycle, Isabela charges at you. The fight is fast-paced and intense, with Isabela using hit-and-run tactics to keep you on your toes. It's one of those games that is pretty dynamic in its boss battles, with Isabela proving she's not just Carlito's sidekick, she's a serious threat in her own right. But what makes this battle so interesting isn't just the fight itself, it's what happens afterwards. Instead of doubling down on her villainy arc, Isabela makes a surprising choice. After the dust settles, she begins to doubt her brother's plan and, in a moment of reflection, decides to help you instead of continuing the fight. Following this confrontation, Isabela has a major change of heart. She realizes that Carlito's desire for revenge has gone too far, and there is no justice in continuing to slaughter innocent people. Unlike Carlito, who's too far gone in his thirst for vengeance, Isabela starts to see the bigger picture. This is where Isabela's character really shines. She flips the script and becomes one of your most valuable allies. She helps you uncover the truth about the zombie outbreak, including the government's shady practices. Her decision to switch sides isn't just a random plot twist. It's a key moment of character growth. Isabela's redemption arc kicks into high gear as she begins working to undo the damage she helped cause.
Mama.
Did you figure it out?
Pachamama. Mother Earth. Our parents said that a lot.
What the hell are you doing?
Stephen Chapman, the maniacal manager of Seance Food and Stuff, is one of the game's most unforgettable and tragically unhinged psychopaths. As a symbol of how the zombie apocalypse messes with the minds of ordinary people, Stephen's descent into madness is as chilling as those dozen packs of soda Stephen seems to enjoy too much. It is strangely relatable. He's not just fighting zombies, he's battling his own obsession with control, order, and authority. Before the world went to hell, Stephen was just your everyday, overzealous grocery store manager, proudly overseeing every can of beans and loaf of bread on the shelf. Keeping things organized and making sure everyone followed the rules was his life's work. But when the zombie outbreak came, Stephen's dedication to order took a turn for the worse.
I don't allow vandalism in my store!
By the time you encounter him, Stephen has fully snapped, patrolling the store like a madman with his shopping cart of death. What makes Steven so compelling and terrifying is that his breakdown isn't just about the zombies. He can't cope with the loss of his authority, of his structured little world. Instead of seeing the survivors as fellow victims, he brands them as criminals. His obsession with control warps his mind, turning him from an overworked manager into a full-time psychopath. The fight is as chaotic as his state of mind. As he barrels down the aisles, screaming about law and thieves, it's an absurd but terrifying battle that captures the heart of his madness. His rants during the fight reveal just how far he's fallen. When he finally defeats Steven, his death is surprisingly sad. He clutches a shopping cart in his final moments, muttering about how no one respects the law anymore. Even in death, Steven can't let go of his obsession with control. It's a poignant end for a man who was consumed by the very thing he lived for.
My food, my sales, my customers.
Fantastic!
Stay away from there, Gramps!
And then we have Adam MacIntyre, better known as Adam the Clown. He is one of the most unforgettable psychopaths in Dead Rising. With his every kid's greatest nightmare appearance, Adam's story shows us how the zombie outbreak can push even the most innocent souls over the edge. Once a beloved children's entertainer, Adam's transformation into a chainsaw-wielding maniac makes him a terrifying figure. Before the chaos, Adam was a children's entertainer at the Parkview Mall, juggling, performing tricks, and bringing smiles to families with his clown persona. For Adam, being a clown was not just a job, it was his identity, and he lived to spread the joy. But when the zombie hit, Adam's world of laughter was destroyed in an instant. He witnessed his audience, fellow performers, and friends either killed or turned into the undead, a trauma that broke his little spirits and mind. The once happy clown could no longer handle the nightmare unfolding around him. Unable to cope with the horrors he witnessed, Adam snapped. But rather than fight for survival, he decided to cling to his role as a clown, twisting it into something darker and deadly. Instead of juggling harmless objects, Adam now juggles chainsaws, turning his clownish skills into a weapon. His madness is a twisted defense mechanism. He's unable to let go of his past life, so he retreats into a warped version of it, where the chainsaws becomes his new props and the death becomes the punchline. You encounter Adam in the Willamette Mall's amusement park, an eerie, decaying backdrop that perfectly mirrors Adam's broken psyche. Once a place of joy, the park has now become a stage for Adam's madness. With its broken rides and darkened atmosphere, the amusement park reflects Adam's fractured state of mind, where he continues to perform as if nothing has changed. The battle against Adam is one of the most memorable in the game. With his chainsaws in hand, Adam the Clown moves unpredictably, alternating between juggling his weapons and throwing them at you. Throughout the battle, Adam continues to act like he's putting on a show, referring to Frank as just another member of his audience. But behind the laughter, there's a sense of desperation. If you're quiet enough, you can hear it. Adam's mind is shattered, and he's clinging to his performance because it's all he has left. Fun fact, by the way, fans of Adam, like in real life, see him more as misunderstood rather than evil. Keeping that ride going was his final attempt at keeping the children safe from danger. This guy's a legit full-blown hero. We're just terrified of clowns, so yeah. When you finally defeats Adam, his death is both grotesque and creepy. In his final moments, Adam falls onto both of his chainsaws, which continue spinning as he laughs uncontrollably, even as he bleeds out. It's honestly a disturbing scene. A man who can't stop laughing, reminding you to switch out those Tickle Me Elmo batteries you got hiding in your closet.
Yeah.
Look, mister, if we're gonna fight these zombies, we need guns! God, stay back!
Cletus Samson, the trigger-happy owner of the Hunting Shack, is a classic example of how the apocalypse can bring out the worst in people. This gun-loving survivalist is the embodiment of the paranoid, self-reliant type who's more dangerous to other survivors than the zombies themselves. His story is honestly the most terrifying reality about how fear, isolation, and obsession can turn a man into his own worst enemy. Before Willamette's Mall became ground zero for a zombie nightmare, Cletus was your typical hunting store owner, passionate about firearms and probably spent his weekends bagging deer. And when the zombie outbreak hit, Cletus saw it as his moment, his purpose in life, that the world had finally proven him right. And now, it's every man for himself. Cletus barricades himself inside his shop, shotgun in hand, trusting no one, and ready to blow away anyone who steps too close. His paranoia has him seeing red, introducing a new story policy of shoot first and ask questions later. Your first encounter with him is a tense standoff, with Cletus waving a shotgun and downing alcohol, shouting at you to stay away from his store. The fight itself? It's as intense as you'd expect. He's a skilled drunken marksman, using his shotgun with brutal precision. The fight takes place in the cramped aisles of the Hunting Shack, where Cletus ducks behind counters, pops out for a quick shot, and barrels through with wild unpredictability. After the fierce battle, Cletus meets his end, but even in his death, similar to Steven's, he clutches his shotgun, refusing to let go of the one thing that gave him a sense of control in a world that's gone mad. His final words aren't those of a villain, but of a man who was simply trying to protect what he truly believed was his. In his mind, he was never the bad guy, just the guy who refused to trust anyone. I'm sure wherever Cletus is, he's hitching a ride in the afterlife with his beliefs in riding shotgun. Who are the convicts? It doesn't really matter. What we do know is that they broke out of prison during the zombie outbreak, and instead of running for their lives, they decided to stick around and unleash hell. The three stooges, fugitives are Sam Franklin, the leader, who sits in the back of the Humvee, gleefully firing the mounted machine gun. He's the biggest threat, using the gun to shred anything in their path. Miguel Sanchez rides shotgun, literally, but the wimp uses a baseball bat, smashing anyone who gets too close. And lastly, Reginald Jenkins, behind the wheel, the only saving grace. You can thank this guy for the win, as he has an obsession of steering into trees. These guys are like a shot of adrenaline to the game, transforming the zombie-infested mall into their personal playground. They may not have the intricate backstories like the other psychopaths, The Convicts are memorable for their sheer unpredictability and the danger they bring to the early stages of the game. The first time you encounter the Convicts, they burst into the scene in the middle of the Leisure Park Mall, cruising in a stolen military Humvee, like they're starring in their own post-apocalyptic themed action flick. Jesus, that was a tongue twister. The fight is a frantic game of cat and mouse, and defeating the convicts feels like a huge victory. Not only do you take down the criminals and feel like a superhero, but you also get a reward, their Humvee. Yup, you can hop into the very vehicle they use to terrorize the park and turn it against the zombies. It's just a satisfying moment of poetic justice. But don't get too comfortable. Just when you think you've put the convicts down for good, they come back, continuing to wreak havoc. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, I guess they're trying to say a criminal is a criminal. All I'm gonna say is this: if you don't got the time, don't do the crime.
Frankie, good timing. I was just about to shoot my piece de resistance. I'm gonna capture on film the exact moment that a human being crosses into zombiehood.
And then we have Ken Swanson. He isn't your typical psychopath. Sure, the game is packed with unhinged characters, but Ken? No. He's special. A fellow photojournalist who goes from friendly rival to deadly, fame-obsessed lunatic. Kent's downright annoying, driven by his incredibly forced laughter. And jealousy, making his transformation one of the most personal and psychologically complex stories in the game. He's not about survival or fear. Kent's fueled by a need to prove he's better than you. What starts as playful competition quickly spirals into something far darker. He views Frank as a legend in the photography world, but his admiration is tainted by envy. Kent's goal is simple: outshine you and prove he's the superior photographer. While you're trying to unravel the mystery behind the outbreak, Kent is laser focused on using the chaos as his personal career-making event. In his eyes, the zombies aren't a threat. They're an opportunity. Kent sets up a series of photo challenges for Frank, testing his skills, and he becomes less about friendly competition and more about taking Frank down a peg. As you keep winning these challenges, it becomes clear that Kent's admiration is turning into frustration. He can't stand living in Frank's shadow and snaps, accusing Frank of sabotaging him. That's when Kent's transformation really takes off. He no longer wants to beat Frank. He wants to kill him. His twisted logic: if he can take the ultimate shot, a photo of Frank's dead body, he'll finally prove his superiority. It's a brutal shift from friendly competition to full-blown murder. Kent's obsession with fame and his need for validation have consumed him, turning him into one of the game's most petty adversaries. The fight with Kent takes place in a photography studio. The location itself is a perfect metaphor for their rivalry. Two photographers battling it out in the place they both thrive in. Genius. Kent uses his agility and photography equipment to attack Frank, taunting him the entire time. He's not just fighting to survive, he's fighting for validation, for that one perfect shot that will cement his legacy. Kent's dialogue during the fights is filled with delusions of grandeur. He believes killing Frank will be his big break, that it'll make him a legend. It's clear that Kent is completely disconnected from reality. When you finally defeat Kent, his death scene is just sad and disturbing. Even in his final moments, Kent is desperate to capture that one last shot. Cliff Hudson. Man, I feel bad for this guy. He's a war vet whose unresolved trauma and grief are central to his descent into madness. Before the zombie outbreak, Cliff carried the emotional scars of war, likely suffering from undiagnosed PTSD. His inability to reintegrate into civilian life left him isolated and survivalist in nature. When the outbreak occurred, it triggered his wartime instincts, but the real breaking point came when he witnessed the horrific deaths of his wife and granddaughter. I'm not gonna lie, I thought this guy was a lot younger, but apparently he's a grandfather. So this fresh trauma, compounded with his already fragile mental state, pushed Cliff over the edge. The grief of losing his family, combined with memories of the comrades he couldn't save in war, created a deep sense of guilt and paranoia. Cliff's response to the outbreak became deeply personal. His mind regressed to a soldier's mentality, where survival meant viewing everyone as an enemy. As he barricades himself in Chrislip's home saloon, he transformed it into a fortress using his military training, setting traps and turning everyday tools into weapons. The store's cluttered and chaotic setup mirrors Cliff's mental state, showcasing his paranoia and delusional tendencies. When you encounter Cliff, it becomes clear that this is no ordinary boss fight. Cliff uses guerrilla warfare tactics, relying on his military experience to stalk Frank. You must navigate the store's cluttered environment while evading surprise attacks from Cliff, who is skilled with machete and adept to hiding in the shadows. His unpredictable movements and ambush tactics make him one of the most dangerous and challenging psychopaths you face. Throughout the fight, Cliff spouts military jargon and delusional rants, fully immersed in his belief that he's still on the battlefield. As the battle reaches its conclusion, Frank defeats Cliff in a brutal and emotional encounter. In his dying moments, Cliff experiences a brief return to clarity. He expresses deep regret for his actions, acknowledging his failure to save his family and recognizing the madness that had overtaken him. Cliff's death is one of the more emotional moments in Dead Rising, setting him apart from many of the other psychopaths who die in denial, rage. His demise is a tragic farewell, symbolizing the devastating effects of unresolved trauma and grief.
When I heard her scream, I just lost it.
Anyone there?
What have we here? Looks like you lured another man in
Joe
here,
Slade. Man, jeez. Joe Slade is one of the most unsettling psychopaths in Dead Rising, a game that features human enemies whose mental breakdown during the zombie apocalypse turns them into dangerous adversaries, right? Well, Joe was once a mall security officer, obsessed with her authority and the power that came with it. Her role was to protect and enforce order, but she took it to an extreme, using her position to dominate and bully others. Under the badge, Joe was already a person with deep-seated issues related to control and sadism. Before the outbreak, Joe's strict approach to her job hinted at her power-hungry nature, but it wasn't until the collapse of society that she fully embraced her darkest tendencies. Instead of being broken by the chaos, Joe thrived in the lawless environments of the apocalypse, without rules or oversight. Her desire for control grew more extreme as she turned from protector to predator, using the apocalypse to victimize the very people she was supposed to protect. Her behavior took a dark turn as she captured survivors, particularly women. and held them hostage. She didn't view them as people in need of help, but rather as playthings she could manipulate and control. Her sadistic impulses became her main motivation, driven not by survival, but by the need to assert dominance over those more vulnerable than herself. For Joe, the apocalypse wasn't a disaster, it was an opportunity, much like the other psychopaths. You encounter Joe Slade in the back corridors of the mall where she is holding several women captive. This confrontation highlights Joe's transformation from a rigid security officer into a fully deranged figure. Joe is armed with a taser and a baton, the very tools she used in her former life to maintain order, but now she uses them to terrorize and torture. During this fight, she takes pleasure in every hit, revealing how far her mind has deteriorated. Joe taunts Frank throughout the battle, mocking his attempts to rescue her hostages, which reflects her delusional beliefs that she's still in control. Her cruel and taunting dialogue makes it very frustrating. The fight against her is disturbing not only because of her attacks, but also because of her twisted personality. When Joe is finally defeated by Frank, her death is just gross. Even in the final moments, Joe clings to her delusions of control, unable to accept that her power means nothing in a world overrun by zombies.
Behold! The end of the world is upon us. Death itself has overflowed upon the world, defiling us all.
Meet Sean Keanan, better known as Sean the Cult Leader, a guy who really took the whole end of the world thing to heart. In the middle of a zombie apocalypse, most people are trying to avoid getting eaten. Not Sean. He's too busy leading the True Eye Cult, a fanatical group that worships the outbreak as a divine gift. While the rest of the world is losing their mind, Sean's out here converting the mall's terrified survivors into his personal army of yellow raincoats wearing, mask wielding zealots. You know how some people get a little too into conspiracy theories? Sean takes it a step further. He doesn't just believe in the apocalypse, he embraces it like it's his moment to shine. This guy goes from your average nobody to proclaiming himself as a prophet, using the chaos around him to indulge his power-hungry fantasies. He's got people convinced that only through total obedience to his bizarre vision of the apocalypse can they be saved. They're just everywhere, lurking in the mall, snatching up survivors and their brutal rituals, and trust me, these folks aren't just handing out hugs. For Sean's followers, the cult offers more than just safety. It offers
salvation.
When you've lost everything and the world's gone full-on horror movie, some people will latch onto anything that gives them meaning, even if it means going full-on psycho. Sean preys on these lost souls, promising them salvation if they just do exactly what he says. Oh, and if they happen to lose their moral compass along the way, well, according to Sean, that's just part of the divine plan. When you finally encounter Sean and his mini goblins, the stage is set for one of the game's most intense battles. Picture this. A once cheerful movie theater now turned into the True Eye Cult's personal sacrifice chamber. The smell of popcorn is long gone, replaced by the unsettling sense of blood and desperation. Not just to the cult, but to his entire power trip. This leads to a chaotic and deadly showdown. Sean himself is a dangerous adversary. He strikes with precision and fury, believing that he's invincible thanks to his delusional beliefs. All the while, Sean spewing fanatical speeches about Frank being an enemy of the True Eye, and how this is all part of the cosmic plan. It's a wild ride from start to finish. When Frank finally defeats him, Sean's delusions crumble with him. In his dying moments, Sean is completely bewildered, unable to understand how his divine mission could have failed. With Sean's death, the True Eye cult collapses, his followers lost without their leader, scatter in confusion, and the death cult is no more.
Hello?
Please stop! What did we ever do to you?
You do it all the time!
Paul Carson is hands down one of the most bizarre, tragic, and oddly endearing psychopaths you'll come across in Dead Rising. A scared kid playing with fire, literally. His story isn't about some deep-seated evil. It's about insecurity, fear, and a guy who really just wants someone to pay attention to him, even if it means burning the whole place down. Before the zombie apocalypse, Paul wasn't just some evil genius or a tough guy. He was that guy who was always kind of there. You know the type. Lonely, insecure, and always in the background. Paul never got too much attention, and he spent most of his time feeling like he didn't matter. He craved recognition. As the outbreak spiraled into madness, so did Paul. The fire he played with became a symbol of control for him, something to wield in a world where everything was falling apart. While most people were panicking about zombies ripping them to shreds, Paul was too busy lighting matches and thinking, this will show him. In the end, after the flames, the running, and the chaos, you finally take him down. But here's where things get a little bit interesting. Instead of dying in a blaze of glory like some psychopath, Paul fumbles and trips, and wait for it, sets himself on fire. Cue the panic. Paul freaks out, flailing and screaming as his clothes go up in flames, and now the ball's in your court. You get to choose. Let the guy burn to death, or, if you're feeling generous, save him. This is where Paul's story takes a hard left turn. If you put out the flames, Paul doesn't just disappear like every other psychopath. He breaks down. He's not angry or defiant. He's shaken to his core. In a moment of sheer vulnerability, Paul realizes how close he came to dying, and that's when it hits him. He's been a complete idiot. Paul, the insecure fire starter, offers you his lighter as a peace offering, symbolizing that he's done with this whole arson thing. It's kind of a touching moment, really. You realize Paul isn't evil. He was just lost, trying to matter in a world that had always ignored him and honestly didn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Looks like 72 yards. I can blow his head off clean from here.
The Hall family in Dead Rising, Roger, Jack, and Thomas, are the ultimate dysfunctional, power-hungry trio who see the zombie apocalypse as their playground for chaos. Before everything went to hell, they were just your typical wealthy, entitled jerks. But when the outbreak hit, they didn't panic. They got creative. With no laws or consequences, the Halls turned Willamette Mall into their own little empire of terror, hoarding supplies and tormenting anyone they could. Led by the father, Roger, they thrived on making others suffer, treating survivors like pawns in their twisted little game of power. When you finally confront the Hall family, the showdown is intense. These guys don't fight fair. They attack Frank all at once, using brute strength and dirty tricks to try and overpower him. Roger, the aggressive patriarch, leads the charge with salvage melee attacks, while Jack, his more physically imposing son, tries to crush Frank with his strength. Meanwhile, the younger son, Thomas, stays back, more cautious but just as dangerous, waiting for the right moment to strike. It's a chaotic 3-on-1 brawl, and the Halls work together like a well-oiled machine, or at least until Frank starts turning the tide. As you pick them off one by one, the family's dynamic begins to crumble. Their death scene is a fitting end to their reign of terror. Roger dies in shock, still clinging to the idea that he was once untouchable, while his sons fall apart without his control. It's karma, really. These bullies, who once thought they were invincible, are reduced to nothing. Their deaths bring a twisted satisfaction as you take down not just a trio of psychopaths, but a family whose cruelty knew no bounds.
Perfect.
Larry Chiang, aka the Butcher of Dead Rising, is easily one of the game's most grotesque and terrifying psychopaths. I know, I said this, but this guy is absolutely disturbing. Before the zombie outbreak, Larry was just an ordinary guy, a butcher who spent his days slicing up meats in the Willamette Mall. Sure, it wasn't the most glamorous job, but it paid the bills. Little did anyone know that this mundane butcher was just one apocalypse away from becoming a flesh-eating madman. When the zombies hit, Larry didn't just lose his mind. He embraced the chaos. With no more rules, no more customers, and certainly no health inspectors to worry about, he transformed the meat processing plant into his personal slaughterhouse. Zombies, humans, to Larry, they're all just slabs of meat, ready to be sliced. You, as Frank West, come face to face with Larry. As you walk into the butcher shop, Larry charges at you with surprising speed. For someone of his size, swinging that massive cleaver with the precision of a guy who's been cutting steaks his whole life. What makes this fight even more stressful is that you're on a time limit to beat him. Literally, Carlito's rolling down the conveyor belt into his death while this huge guy is trying to ram you down. As the fight comes to its blood-soaked end, karma finally catches up with Larry in a brutal and fitting twist of fate. But here's the kicker. Larry doesn't scream in terror, beg for mercy, or even show regret. He just accepts it. He's not just a character, he's a symbol of unchecked gluttony and the absolute collapse of humanity. In a world where resources are scarce, Larry's solution is to eat whatever and whoever he can. He's the ultimate consumer, devouring everything in sight with no regard for life or decency.
You can try the best ground meat you've ever tasted.
Whoa, ground? All right.
And then we have Brock Mason, the final boss of the game. He's a battle-hardened, mission-obsessed Special Forces commander sent to Willamette with one job: clean up the zombie apocalypse and sweep the truth under the rug. The outbreak? It's not just bad luck. It's the US government's dirty little secret, and Brock is the guy you call when things go south. As the man in charge of containing the mess, Brock isn't there to save civilians or play a hero. He's the embodiment of cold military efficiency. His orders are simple: eliminate the zombies, bury the government's bioweapons, and silence anyone who knows too much. That includes Frank West, your average guy turned zombie-slaying photojournalist. The stakes couldn't be higher. Expose the truth or take it to the grave, bud. And now we get to the good stuff, the epic, heart-pounding final battle. You, as Frank West, facing off against Brock Mason on top of a massive military tank. How more badass can that get? Brock doesn't mess around. He's quick, he's brutal, and his military training makes him an absolute beast in combat. Players are constantly on the move, dodging Brock's lightning-fast attacks. The tank itself isn't just a cool setting, it's a symbol of the military-industrial machine Brock represents. He's literally standing on the might of the US military, while Frank represents the scrappy fights for truth and justice. It's not just a battle of fists, it's a battle of ideals. After a grueling, sweat-drenched battle, Frank manages to defeat Brock in what feels like a David and Goliath moment. Brock, ever the soldier, dies with his loyalty intact. He never questions his orders, never falters in his mission, and never regrets the path he's chosen. The psychopaths in this game aren't just your run-of-the-mill bad guys. They're people twisted by the events around them, each with their own crazy backstories. Fear, trauma, or just the freedom to go full-on mad has pushed them over the edge. Some are out for power, others for revenge, and a few are just plain broken by the madness around them. Take Carlito, for example, on his tragic mission for justice, or Adam the Clown, desperately clinging on to his last shred of happiness with balloons and chainsaws. And while a few like Paul Carson managed to find some redemption, others like the Butcher or the brutal cop, Joe Slade, get completely swallowed by their own insanity. In the end, these psychopaths remind us that in a world crawling with zombies, the real monsters might just be the ones who have lost their minds in the mayhem.